In this video, we are going to be talking about the Ingmar Bergman film from 1968, Hour of the Wolf, which was his only horror film, and it starred Max von Sydow and Liv Ullmann. My guest today, I want to welcome back Cinema Dave from his great YouTube channel. He was on about a year ago, and he's here to talk about Bergman. Finally, I'm really looking forward to having him back because I know you're a big Bergman fan, Dave. So welcome back.
Robert, thanks so much for having me. And again, I love your channel as well. So much great content out there. I really appreciate you having me on. Bergman is I'm such a fan of all of Bergman's films, and to talk about Hour of the Wolf today too, I think is going to be amazing. So I was really excited about this discussion.
Yeah, no, me too. Just before we jump into Hour of the Wolf, I know we touched on this a little bit before we started to record, but when did you initially get interested in Bergman? And was it an acquired taste, or did you take to him immediately?
I mean, I think it was more of an acquired taste. I think years ago I tried to watch, I would watch, I think many of the more popular films, maybe like The Seventh Seal or Wild Strawberries. I was always a fan of The Seventh Seal. And then one year I tried to watch Wild Strawberries, and I just wasn't really that interested in it. I think when Criterion came out with the Bergman, set, which is an amazing set, by the way.
Yes.
That's one of my, top, I would say top 10 possessions in terms of film. I started to watch the films in the curated order from that particular set in 2019, and I watched them all probably in about a 2-month period.
Wow.
Including lots of the extras, maybe not all the extras, but I watched them all, and I really for the first time, I think I really understood Bergman. I'm not an expert or anything like that, but I certainly became a fan at that point, looking at his entire body of work. And I had seen also another film called Bergman Island, which is about him spending his last years on the island that he filmed, Persona, and Hour of the Wolf, I believe, was filmed on the island as well, Faroe Island.
Yeah, I've been meaning to watch that because it's also on the Criterion channel, but it looks great.
It's, it's really, really great just to see his, his personality and the way he works and just his thoughts, So, one thing too I wanted to say about Bergman before we get into the discussion is that I feel like, to me, Bergman films, they're very personal for me. I've been thinking about this a lot because I feel like the reason is, many times, and I've heard Scorsese talk about this too, but Bergman writes in a very poetic way, and he's sort of writing to you if you watch the films in that way. So I feel like he's really speaking to me when I watch those films, and maybe that was intentional, maybe not, but even in Hour of the Wolf, I feel the same way. But certainly in even the more popular films, it seems to be that way, and I think that was his technique, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, but at the time that Bergman was working, he's doing theatrical work as well as films, right? So he's doing theater, I think, during the winter, and then in the summertime making these films. So that's the other thing that I think really attracted me to his work, is because I've had a foundation sort of in the theater, a history in the theater, and so I have a lot of respect for actors and directors and the entire process of theater. And to me, his films are very theatrical. I mean, I'm sure you would agree with that, probably, that there's absolutely a lot of, and he's working with a troupe of people, right, that he works with, which I know a lot of directors do.
Yeah.
But certainly he's working in the theater with these actors, and then he's taking them on the set to do these films. So that's how I got into Bergman, and I'm a huge fan.
Well, it's interesting because you're right in terms of it. They have a theatrical feel, but he was also so incredible at making them so cinematic. I mean, his use of light, and I think another reason why it feels so personal is because of how intimate they are, and those close-ups, my God, are so incredible. And it reminds me of like Sidney Lumet. Even though he did a lot of stage plays, they were still always very cinematic. He always brought he used the camera as well to share his feelings about the story and the way he saw it. And I think Bergman did that in his own way as well. So no, I totally agree with you on that one.
I mean, in general, as a technique, I'm such a huge fan of the close-up too, right?
Me
the
too,
close-up,
yeah.
I mean, if there's a director that really focuses on that, that's the best thing. If you can really see an actor's face and see exactly what's happening. There's so many great examples in Hour of the Wolf as well, as I know we'll get into. But I was reading today too that this was the film that was made after Persona, which is a masterpiece, right? And so I don't think it was received as well as Persona, but to me, I think you said this in the beginning, that this is Bergman's only horror film. Really, he really didn't do, even though there's obviously some psychological elements in all the films. This is really the only horror film, and to me, it's very horrifying. I mean, we're in Halloween season now too, so it's a perfect time to watch this film and maybe get into Bergman. Hour of the Wolf, like I said, is very, to me anyway, very terrifying. So,
I completely agree, and it's very psychological horror as well. And I'd be curious to see what people who are like really, really big horror film buffs, what they would think about Bergman's take on horror. So if anyone has seen it, please comment below. I would love to hear what you think.
For me, horror films, I mean, I'm a fan of films of the 70s and the 80s, and I feel like some of the earlier horror films, and maybe even before that too, a lot of the most terrifying things happen in our minds, right?
Yes.
And so to me, I don't really need to see a film that has a lot of gore or a lot of graphic kind of violence.
I'm the same way.
Right. And in a way that also makes the viewing of any of these types of films a very personal experience, right? Because you're giving I mean, this is a general film watching experience, but you are participating in the film process by using your experience, right? Your view of the film can be totally different than mine just because of my life experience, right?
Right.
So
particularly a film like this, because it's so ambiguous. I've read so many different interpretations of what people saw in it, and I love ambiguity, and that can be a very frustrating experience, because I think often audiences, particularly people in America or Canada, we're used to everything being, not everything, but in a more commercial sense, being direct and spoon-fed and things you can kick your feet up and eat popcorn to. But you can't really do that to Bergman in general. And this film in particular is it is so demanding. It requires so much from the audience to reflect on. So I just want to read the IMDb plot in case anyone hasn't seen it. So it's while vacationing on a remote Scandinavian island with his younger pregnant wife, an artist has an emotional breakdown while confronting his repressed desires. So I'm curious, off the top, just what are your, I know you like this film, but what were your general feelings about it? I mean, was this a tough watch for you, or did you just take to it and enjoy every minute?
So in preparation for this video, obviously I watched it, yesterday. And I had seen it before, and I always get new things from Bergman every time I watch a film. That's the other thing I love about his films too, is I'm always taking new insights, and I feel like I learned a lot even the second, viewing.
Yeah, me too.
And so, one of the things that really struck me at the beginning of the film, I could just watch Liv Ullmann, a close up on her for the whole. I mean, I could watch hours of that and I feel like, if we're going to kind of go through it too, and I'm sure we're going to spoil this a little bit. We're going to spoil this film a little bit, right?
Yeah, that's fine.
I mean, we don't have to necessarily get into all the details, but I love the beginning of the movie because, there's all these kind of sounds in the background as the credits are rolling. So, it's kind of documentary style in the beginning, right? Where they're talking to Liv Ullmann about her experience that she's just gone through, or maybe it's, recently, or maybe it's been a while back, but she's sitting at a table and you're just looking at her, and I also really enjoy when, and Bergman does this a lot too, when a character looks directly into the camera, right? Which is that doesn't happen in every film, but you really feel connected to that movie if someone looks at you directly into the camera, especially a prolonged look like that. You feel super connected to it. So I find also with Bergman is that I'm in from the beginning, right? So how some films, it kind of takes you a while to get into it, or especially these days, people are on their phones and they try to, you really try to get into a film, or sometimes you turn it off. As soon as one of these films starts, I'm in. I'm all in.
Yeah, me too.
From the beginning. And that's got to be about the technique, and obviously I'm a fan already, but I wasn't sure what to expect on this particular viewing, but again, I was all in. I was really almost mesmerized from the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
No, me too. I think he has a way of just grabbing your attention. And I think that's a good point. I mean, those close-ups he's known for, and they're so intimate. And even if it's not some, as you said, sometimes it's not just a close-up. Sometimes they're talking right to the audience.
yeah,
And it's such an interesting way to begin the film where it's a film crew and she's talking, I guess, to Bergman, really, as
yeah,
hey, oh, I found that she found her husband's diary and telling the story of her husband. It was like a Shakespeare soliloquy, which was
absolutely.
so great.
Yeah.
Um, you know, as I said, this is not a simple film, but did you find that it had as Sidney Lumet says, a spine to it, an essence to it?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we're watching the deterioration of this man, of this painter, Max von Sydow plays, right? To me, it's all about that, and you very quickly get into the interior of his mind. I feel like so. To me, even on the first watch, I felt this too. I pretty much there's a woman that shows up while Liv Ullmann is hanging out the laundry, right?
Right.
And so I felt like at that moment I felt like something strange is going on here. I don't quite know who this woman is or how she appeared here, but it seemed like they were alone on the island for a
Yeah.
while, or they were in an isolated area.
Feels like a
But then this,
ghost. Like it's
yeah,
hard
yeah,
to
exactly. It feels
say, right?
right, and it feels like too. I mean, I'm reminded of so many great moments in this film, but I'm also reminded of the scene in the laundry where she's hanging up the laundry and the wind is blowing, and Max von Sydow is there as well. It's not at this particular point, but just having the laundry there is really interesting too. It's very ghostly, right? Because it's white sheets, white laundry, and then you see this woman that
Mm,
appears,
mm,
and it's very she says at one point I'm 216 years old, and then she oh no I'm 76 years old, but then you
right.
kind of know that there's some dreamlike quality happening here, right? And to me, I wasn't really caught off guard by it. Like I said, since I'm all in, I'm up for the roller coaster ride, is what I'm saying, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
From the
no,
beginning.
absolutely. It's a tough one. It's a tough one to nail down, and I think that you're certainly right in terms of this man played by Max von Sydow is basically having a nervous breakdown or he's mentally ill. His life is deteriorating. But I think as much as it is about him, I think it's equally about her and
Oh,
how
sure.
she can't reach him.
Yep.
And that we think we really know someone until maybe we don't. And I think that's very true. I mean, you could be married to someone for years and then suddenly they're having experiences from something that happened to them as a child, or they've had mental health issues which are now hitting them much harder at this point. And as much as she tries to reach him and help him, his problems are beyond her. I think as much as that is ambiguous about it, I think to me that was really the heart of it. I don't know if that resonated with you.
No, absolutely too. But the other thing too is I feel like Max von Sydow, the character too, or the character of the painter,
Yeah.
he's experiencing things that maybe we've all experienced before. He's worried about work. He's not sleeping well. He's afraid of the dark. I mean, this is mentioned in the movie as well, right? So to me, I feel like part of that sleep deprivation, and I can tell you too that I've sort of had my own bouts with insomnia, before, and speaking of the actual hour of the wolf, which supposedly is between 3 and 5 a.m. in the morning, and I wrote it down too because it's talked about. It's the hour between night and dawn when most people die. Sleep is the deepest. Nightmares are most real. It's the hour when the sleepless are haunted by the worst anguish, when ghosts and demons are most powerful, right?
I
And
love that.
so,
I'm glad you wrote it down because I also wrote it down because it's such a great
yeah,
quote.
it's a great quote, but it's also, you know, like I said, I don't know if we talked about this in our last video, but sometimes as a film watcher, if I can't sleep, I'm up during that time and I'll put on a film often.
Right. Right.
And anyone that has trouble sleeping knows what the impact of that, because sometimes maybe you get 4 hours of sleep a night, and then sometimes you catch up, but it does have an impact on your mental
Yes,
capacity.
absolutely.
So I feel like as much as um, Johann is having a breakdown, it's kind of a common one, right?
Mm.
It's kind of it's not that he's very mentally disturbed in some way. He's not able to sleep. He's worried about work. It's a common thing maybe that we all could experience, right?
Well, that's interesting. I didn't really think too much about that. The lack of what was the lack of sleep doing to him? As someone who's always been a heavy sleeper myself, I that's a really good point. I mean, what does that do to people when they suddenly can never sleep? So because you never know the root of his problem, and there are certainly strong suggestions as to what his problems may be. Of course, that what happened with this woman that he had this long love affair with, Veronica,
Yep.
who is married,
Right.
and of course he was emotionally and physically abused, humiliated by his parents, which I'm sure was actually what Bergman experienced as a
Right.
child. That's
Right.
a I don't know if it's exactly as Johann, played by von Sydow, describes it, but certainly we do know that Bergman was abused by his father.
Yeah, Max von Sydow talks about that, right?
Yeah,
He relates a story, or relays a story basically that it seems very true that Bergman could have experienced, where he was locked in a
yeah,
closet in the dark, right? And I think that's a common fear, the fear of the dark. I
right,
mean, I think as human beings, we're somewhat afraid of the dark.
yeah,
I always remember, and again, I'm just thinking of these things as we're talking here too. My grandmother used to say to me that everything's better in the light, and
right,
sometimes in the middle of the night, if things are dark and maybe your problems seem a little bit worse because it's dark, you have
yes,
to, sometimes you have to get up and turn on a light. That's
yeah.
the only way that maybe you can get through that particular moment. And so, Max von Sydow obviously tells that story, and you think it's Bergman. I mean, that is Bergman talking to us, right?
I think a lot. It's something that a lot of people have said is that he very much, when he was writing from what was going on with him,
Yeah.
and not that they were autobiographical necessarily, but the emotions were very much things that he was experiencing. And but you're right, there is something I know for myself. If I'm anxious about something, it certainly feels a lot worse when it's dark. So
Yeah.
I thought that speech that he has about the hour of the wolf is so true, and I think that really, I think anybody can relate to that. One thing about this film, as we talked about, it's ambiguous because we have these illusions, we have these nightmares, and we don't know where the reality is and where the reality isn't, and it's sort of up to us. I was curious. I thought in a fun way, really, it would be interesting to look at what you are, what you and I felt was real. What did like were there parts of this that you feel that was real, and that other parts were certainly the dreams or the nightmares? I mean, I was curious what your take was on that.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite moments in the movie is this is one of my favorite scenes is when Max von Sydow and Liv Ullmann are sitting down to dinner, and she's talking about the bills. She's going over all these bills, and we've got to keep track of these things. And Max von Sydow is just eating soup and sort of looking at Liv Ullmann, and Max von Sydow's in in a profile, and they're just talking. And I thought that was such a wonderful scene in this movie because it gives you a little bit of relief as well, since it's a very intense film.
Yeah,
And I just thought it was so well done, so perfectly done. He's just eating soup. He's eating a piece of bread. She's going over the bills. He quietly closes the notebook where she's tracking all these bills, saying it doesn't really matter that much anymore, or we'll just go over it at the end of the month or something like that. That moment to me, as well as maybe when they first arrive on the
yeah,
island,
yeah,
those moments I think in the beginning are real, but it quickly deteriorates into something else. And I think even after the woman comes that's in white, right? There's the scene where there's a gentleman that arrives by Jeep, right? And the thing I remember about that particular scene too is the Jeep is kind of on this very steep angle in the frame, right? If you notice. And when I was watching it this last time, I was thinking to myself too, and you know, my wife was watching part of this with me as well, and she was saying, "It looks like that Jeep's going to fall off. It's going to just roll down the hill." And then a man comes up and invites him to the party, and you know, things like that. I think all of those moments. I'm not even sure if the castle that he goes to is real. I'm
Well,
really
that,
not sure
yeah,
about that. I'm not.
yeah.
I'm not. I don't know about you, but I'm not sure about that. I
You
don't
know
know if
what?
that's in
I'm
his
not.
mind.
That you know that's the hard part about it. And as you know, this is a film that you I think the first time I saw it, in the I think in the last 2 or 3 years, I didn't really then think about it enough afterwards. And I think the only way to have a really true, rich viewing experience is to have a discussion like this, or to really think about it on your own. But for me, I was thinking, okay, to get to the spine of this, what first of all, what was real? And I think, yeah, I agree with you. I think what we see when they get there, that they're this like happy couple, they go on this remote island, the scene where, yeah, they're going over the bills and sort of domestic duties and just enjoying themselves. I thought that was all pretty much real.
Yeah, and she poses for him in the beginning, right? If you remember,
Yeah,
so she's doing that. So I feel like that's all real stuff
yeah,
that's really happening. I feel like as soon as the old woman shows up, he's starting to have this kind of a breakdown. I feel like,
yeah,
and there may be, we kind of touched on it a little bit too. When we were talking about shadows and dark and everything, but I feel like some of the scenes in the middle of the night, also when he's there's a great scene which I think has been redone in another movie where he lets a minute go by and you see how long it is,
yes,
right?
yeah,
That is a classic scene. I love that scene that they just let
yeah.
it run for the full minute. But Max von Sydow many times is in the shadow and Liv Ullmann is in the light,
That's
right?
right. Yeah.
So even when there's candles and things like that, now some of those moments to me, when they come back after the party and things like that, some of those moments to me seem real.
Me too. Yeah,
But
I think the night scenes definitely
yeah,
were real, and I think the fact that she looked into the journal was into his diary. What as that's what I mean. It seems like it's a ghost. This woman says to him, "Go read the journal." So whether that was some kind of a calling or what have you, I think that she did.
I
And
agree.
everything that she found in it, this woman that he had this long affair with, played by Ingrid Thulin, we find that they've had this long, long affair, and we don't really know how that ended. And I think that moment where he's outside and she appears again, did she really appear, or is that the fantasy? Again, I think he had such strong sexual desire for her, and
Yeah,
the flip side of that desire was violence. As strong as it was sexually, it was strong if a jealousy or
agreed.
anger came up. And Bergman, I think, had that in him as well. He explored that in Shame. He explored that in Passion of Anna, which they say this is like a trilogy, really, of two people who can't quite come together.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I saw, he starts to undress her as she comes. I mean, he's clearly crazy about her. And I think later on, when she confronts him about it, and he says, "Well, the affair ended, and that was it. I didn't see her again." I think that I really think that he was so guilty because he's married, but he's still hung up on this woman,
Yeah.
and plus everything from his past, how he was traumatized. I think right now, which we saw in Passion of Anna as well, is now coming back to haunt him in a way, in these nightmares and these illusions. And I think there's even more to it than that, really. But that's certainly the mix of the surreal nature of what's happening, and then how the delusions or nightmares are affecting where those people are in that moment. You
Right.
know,
Right. And you remind me too of the first time that woman appears too. I just love that scene where Max von Sydow's on the beach and there's all rocks, and then you see kind of this skirt appear,
yeah.
just out of nowhere. And so yeah, there's so much of this film that is just
And they're always in
dreamlike.
white too,
They're
right? Even
always
the
in
old
white.
woman
Yeah,
is in white,
exactly. Always in
except
white.
except then the other characters at the dinner party, everyone's in black. which is interesting.
Yeah, I don't know if we want to get into the dinner party because that sequence to me, at least even the first sequence, but anytime he's back at the castle is terrifying.
It really is. It really is. And it had this feeling of coming at them. And as originally he was going to call this the cannibals, or this was sort of somewhat of what happened with that script. I don't know if this was necessarily that story, but
Yeah.
and they felt that way because I don't know, he was interested in folklore and fantasy, and apparently he loved, loved like Dracula, the 1931 Dracula, and it feels that way because
Definitely.
it's a POV shot, and the way some of them know him, some of them don't, and they're very creepy. And that dinner scene, he's panning.
Yeah, he's going
It's
back
all
and
in
forth
one
very
shot,
quickly. Yeah.
and he's going back and forth, and it gives you this dreamy, almost vertigo-like feeling. And everything that they're saying is upsetting him to such a
Yeah.
degree, and then in turn upsetting her. And everyone is laughing at the fact that he's upset, and they're not necessarily saying anything that would
Right.
be upsetting. So I don't know if it's just that he's afraid of people, just being around people. Even that guy who comes earlier and asks him all that questions. Again, I don't know if that was a ghost, and he slaps him, tells him to
Slaps
shut
his
up.
face. Yeah.
I
Right.
think, it's another part of going on this island alone, remote, and now these people are here and they're laughing at me, they're humiliating me. And maybe that goes back to being humiliated from his father, from
Could
his
be.
mother, being put in a room and told that there's a creature in there.
Yeah.
And that, I think that's abuse. I mean, that is
Yeah.
emotional. And then getting hit, he describes his father hitting him with the cane. That is emotionally, physically abusive. And of course now, these quote unquote vampires, or whether they're a nightmare or not, are just feeding on that.
Erland Josephson,
Erland Josephson,
right? Yeah,
he's looking at him like he wants to kill him in that
he
scene, and I'm
he
like,
is so scary in a number of those scenes, and I
yeah,
just
he
think
is.
because of the darkness in his eyes. But but I want to say one thing too about, because you and I talked about this a little before we started recording. But for me, if I don't go to many parties anymore, but going to a party for me is particularly terrifying because
Right.
I'm more of an introvert, and I like to have a connection with one or two people if I go to a party, right? And I can imagine Bergman at a party is probably going to be, kind of the same way, probably. Where there's an aspect to that that's very real because he doesn't necessarily want all that social interaction, maybe. Or maybe you get, like for me, working in the theater, I'm sure you feel this way too. I get enough social interaction rehearsing for the play and doing the play. I don't necessarily need the after party. I mean, the after parties are fun, don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying there's an aspect to that social interaction that I'm sure is very terrifying just in general.
Yeah.
So that's where I think a lot of the fears, as much as it's entered into this kind of surreal world and you're not sure what's real and what's a dream, it's also very real fears that people have. Fear of the dark, fear of social interaction, just normal fears. You can't sleep, those types of things.
Yeah.
That's why, for me anyway, I feel like I can relate, or it's very relatable to anyone watching it.
No, I agree, because you're right. I mean, the fantasies are not just purely to then pick out and figure out where the fantasy is and stuff like that. I mean, I think that helps your understanding of the story, but all of these dreamlike sequences are very much rooted in his head or her head, and the nightmares that are going on in their head, and what that's, because it's such an emotional film. And I know Hitchcock said that as well, with when people would ask him about his films, and he said, well, they're kind of like nightmares. And the journalist kind of questioned him on that, and I forget exactly what he asked, but he's like, well, yeah, but nightmares aren't real, or something along those lines. And then he goes, yeah, but they feel real. He said something like that, and that's exactly right. I mean, anyone who's had a nightmare, often they don't make sense, but they feel so real, and they're have something to do with what's going on in your state of mind, often in that moment. So I found that really, really interesting. But I agree with you. I really didn't think that they necessarily existed. I think that they were feeding on him. And I think that scene completely towards the end, where he goes into the castle and he's looking, oh, Veronica's here, the woman that he had this long affair with. And he finds her, and she's almost like a vampire herself. Like, she's
Yeah.
lying there naked with like this robe over her face. And even the way when she's laughing as they start to kiss each other, her head goes up. I think that's like the cover of the poster, is her face there, and it's upside down, but she looks like almost like a vampire.
It's terrifying. It's terrifying.
And everyone's laughing at him, and that one guy's climbing the. He's and Bergman,
like the alcove. Yeah.
Bergman had that. These are all things that he, the woman who takes her face off, the guy climbing the walls, and it's affecting his work too. I mean, he talks to Liv Ullmann earlier about what he's painting, and it's interesting because you never see the paintings, but you see Liv Ullmann looking at them in like horror, and he says, "This is the Birdman. This is the woman who takes her face off," and you get the sense that he's not happy with his work, that his state of mind and his what's happening, is he can't help but put that into his work, but he doesn't want to be this cynical. And I think if you look at Bergman's films in the 60s, they were very dark and cynical, and that's not to criticize them, because I think we have cynicism in us, and there is a lot of cynical nature that is true, and he explored that. So maybe he doesn't even really like these movies in a way. I don't know, but I think
it's possible.
Johan is saying that he's a fraud, and he says that later on. He just feels that it's like self-hatred. I don't know if you felt that way.
Yeah, I mean, I was reminded too, since we were talking about some of the later scenes, that I just love that scene where Max von Sydow is running his hand over Veronica, right? It's Veronica, right?
Yes.
When he takes the sheet off, and I just think that level of close up for that long too is really amazing.
Yeah.
Just amazing technique. And you also start to feel like when you're looking at the human body, you start to maybe look at the human body a little bit differently too. I'm just reminded, I'm visualizing it, thinking of just his hand. I'm just focused on his fingers, his hand as it moves across, and it's like I said, it kind of puts you in a trance, if you will. It's mesmerizing to me.
Yes, it is. Yeah, and stays with you as well. It's so haunting.
It definitely those images kind of stay with you. And we skipped over kind of a part too where Max von Sydow was talking about a snake. He says he lied to Liv Ullmann about a snake bite that he got, and then you cut to the scene where he's fishing, and there's a boy there, and they kind of get into kind of a fight, and that's where he initially gets bit on the leg or something like that, and then he drops the boy basically into the water. That's another very haunting scene where the boy disappears under the water, so you're not really sure if this was all a dream as well, and he remembers murdering this kid that's there. When I watched it, and I feel like when I watched it the first time, I felt this way too, that whole part was a dream, right?
I think so.
The kid is him when he was younger, and he's kind of thinking that he's got a boy on his shoulder there, the whole time. But that's a very crazy scene, sort of in the middle of the, I think it's about in the middle of the movie too, that really, if you're not expecting it, you're like, what is really going on here? What is happening here? If you're not, I mean, if you haven't already bought into the whole idea that there's these dream element and there's a psychological deterioration of this man, then you're kind of thrown off by that particular scene, I feel like.
Well, I think it certainly is. It's interesting that you say that you feel that it's him killing himself as a boy. Maybe I didn't think of that, but maybe that scene is about him feeling he has to kill the past in order to get on with his life, But I think that's a valid interpretation, and it's certainly suggested enough that one can go with it. I can't take credit for something I read online, but someone felt that perhaps that was him killing the creature in the closet as a kid, because that kid is like biting him, he's like a vampire himself, and it's like the creature that his father said was in the closet with him. He hits him over the head with the rock, which is interesting because you see the boy sink, and then right like 20 minutes later in the film he cuts back to that, and you see the boy comes back. And I thought, I wonder if it's like he just couldn't quite can't quite kill the creature.
It's still in the
so
subconscious, right? Yeah, still in the subconscious there too, right? That you really can't, as much as you might want to make peace with some of these memories, you really can't.
It's really something that is coming at him from the haunting him from the past that he cannot come to grips with, that is too scary to come to grips with or to face. And I think, it's interesting because this aspect of this affair with this woman, as he says that, it lasted for years and they had to hide and run around because she was married. And then suddenly the husband comes, finds them, and then he goes to the hospital. So I thought, what was she killed by the husband? Like, what happened here that he went to the hospital? So did he kill her? I don't think this that he killed her. Did she kill herself? It seems murderous because then right ambiguous. After that, that other guy comes in, invites them out to dinner and gives him the gun and says, well, you know how to defend yourself, almost like a joke. And I thought, what are they trying to say? I mean, did this become a laughing stock of the town that this woman had this affair and she was killed? I mean, did these vampires feeding on that? Is that why they're laughing at him later and that humiliating him? I don't know what you thought about that.
Yeah, well, first of all, I was wondering if, Liv Ullmann mentions near the end of the film too that she got grazed by one of the bullets. I thought maybe I heard that wrong, but you see Max von Sydow before he goes to the castle the second time, fire 3 shots, and then you're not sure whether Liv Ullmann is around anymore, right? I mean, we know she's around because she's been doing the documentary piece of it, but you're still, as an audience member, I wasn't sure if she was shot, in multiple places or not. And then she says later she was just kind of grazed there. But
well, that's what's interesting because she then talks about running after him, but then she runs after him with no wounds, with nothing. She's no blood on her. So then it's interesting because you think, well, what is she telling the truth? Are these illusions or delusions in her mind? That whole thing
it's
at
hard
the end.
It's hard for me to disbelieve Liv Ullmann. I pretty much believe what she says as a character and as a person. I feel like,
well, she's she's the character, as he says, that is good, that is like pure, and like he even says that about them. And at the same, but he says, it's almost like, people who are married to spend all this time together, years together, they almost become one. And I think that to an extent there's truth to that, because you spend so much time with something that some of your thoughts become their thoughts and vice versa. So maybe, some of what was happening with him started to happen to her. Because I thought that last scene where he gets killed by all those aristocrats, I mean, to me, they were like vampires, turning into crows and the bites and stuff like that. I thought that was her dream or nightmare. I don't know what you thought about that. I don't think we're no longer in his head.
Exactly right. It just sort of sort of dissolves into that, and then she's at the end of the film she's talking about exactly what happened. It's interesting too because there's so many great themes in this film, but one of the ones you brought up, which is how as a couple, right, you start to look like each other and you start to have similar thoughts. I thought that was very interesting too. Just as a theme in general, like a common thing that happens with couples, I feel like with my wife and I, sometimes she'll say something and I'll say, you have to get out of my head because that's what I was thinking, exactly what I was thinking.
Right.
Now that doesn't happen with that many people, but when you have a close relationship with somebody, that definitely happens. And it's very eerie when that happens too, because you're not really sure how that happened exactly. Right. It becomes its own little, it becomes its own kind of mystery there too. So, speaking of the end of the film too, I had something happen to me in this viewing, and we can certainly go back and talk about other aspects of it. But I wrote down also the last line of the film, and I may be paraphrasing here a little bit, but when Liv Ullmann she says, sometimes you don't know up from down and get completely ... To me, that is the place where, but that's the place where this is the first time this has happened to me, I think, with a Bergman film or with any film really, where I filled in the blank there. I added the last word, and my last word was lost. Okay. So if I read the sentence again, sometimes you don't know up from down and get completely lost. So that's kind of where but that's never happened to me before. And I feel like this is a place where Bergman as a director is asking you to participate. I feel like he's asking you as the audience member to participate in that last line. So I don't know if that happened to you or not, but
I didn't, I noticed that it had this abrupt ending. I didn't necessarily consciously, or maybe I did fill it in and then maybe I didn't clock it, but I certainly recognized how much he was throwing back to the audience,
Yeah.
probably more than other films that include ambiguity. I mean, this may be one of the most ambiguous films I've ever seen, in a really good way, and
In a great way.
and
Yeah.
and I think I think it's interesting to do that with horror and with folklore and with fantasies and surrealism, because you can go to all of these places. Not that you can't with drama or comedy. I mean, there are films that really combine them. It's quite really interesting, but certainly there's much more of a license to just go all out, and he really goes all out with it. I mean, it's incredible. And as much as people connected to persona, which I can see in terms of what's real and what isn't, but I think the real connection to me is Shame and Passion of Anna, because it's that the two people who cannot reach each other, can maybe not even recognize each other anymore because of the hauntings of the past, or in the case of Shame, because of the violence of the present. So I don't know if you felt that connected strongly with those two, or with Persona perhaps.
No, absolutely. I think because there are those aspects of Shame in this one,
Yeah.
and certainly Passion of Anna as well, right? This ability to connect. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The only other thing I wanted to ask is, she basically says he got killed, but I don't think that was reality. But what
I
do you
don't think
think?
so.
What do you think happens to this guy? I mean, we don't really know.
Again, I don't feel like we really know at the end,
Yeah.
right? We don't know if he's around somewhere. We don't know if he went completely crazy. We don't know if he's
I think he just ran off. I think he shot her and ran off, and likely eventually will kill himself, or God knows what. Because again, talking about what may be real and what may not. I mean, for all I know, this whole thing is a dream, and so who can we trust?
I mean, I tend to think along those lines. There's the moments we talked about in the beginning, maybe the first 10 or 15 minutes, that seem to be real. And the rest of that, I feel like we're on unstable ground, and I feel like it's more of a dream. And if you look at it, like when I was watching it the second time, if you look at it in terms of the castle almost being like areas of the brain, in a way, and the forest that way too, right? It's almost the synapses in the brain. I feel like all of those things are all internal. It's all inside. It might be what he's thinking. It might be what he's thinking. It might be a dream. But as soon as Erland Josephson starts walking on the ceiling, I feel like there's something. There's this is not real anymore, right?
So, no, God, no. That was so creepy. And again, that's something that he said he actually dreamed. So wow. I mean, he must have been having some scary nightmares at that time. Right. Well, this was a great chat, Dave. I'd love to have you back again to maybe not necessarily just for Bergman, but for other movies and filmmakers alike. So thanks again for coming on.
Absolutely. And thanks to you, Robert. I absolutely love this conversation. Love to do it again. Thank you so much. I love your channel. I think you're doing some great work there and really getting into a lot of the classics and really getting into some detailed analysis, which I absolutely love. So
thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
No, I appreciate that. And that means a lot to me. So thank you. And where can people find you on social media?
So Cinema Dave Media, that's my YouTube channel. I've got an Instagram and a Twitter of the same name. I'm also on TikTok, believe it or not, Robert. I don't know if you knew that.
Yeah, I did not know that.
I was kind of surprised to be on there, but I actually love it. It's really, it's really interesting.
It's fun,
I have it's, Cinema Dave on TikTok as well, and do very simple videos up there, but it's a lot of fun. So
awesome.
Yep.
I'll leave the links in the description box for those of you who want to get in touch with Dave, and he's got a great channel as well, reviewing films and looking at physical media collections from Kino Lorber and Criterion and many other great companies putting out, DVDs and Blu-rays. So check him out there. And for those of you watching on YouTube, there is also an audio version of this podcast. It doesn't have all of the episodes that are on YouTube, but if you're on the go, You can listen to it as well anywhere that podcasts are released, Apple, Spotify, places like that. I also have a Patreon membership. You go to patreon.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies. I do some Bergman content. So if you want to become a member, the link is in the description box below to check it out there. And lastly, if this is your first time here, please consider subscribing. It's absolutely free to do so by pressing the Robert Bellissimo at the movies logo. You'll see it right here floating above my head to your top left. Just click on that and then click the bell in order to get a notification every time I release a new video or go live. Dave, thanks again, and we will see everyone soon.
Thank you so much.